special live episode of Wrestling with the Future. I'm Angelo DeCipio, joined by the happy haberdasher, Dan the Man Sebastiano. Dan, did you miss me?
Oh, you know, it wasn't the same without you. Take a vacation.
I'm telling you, went on
Only
vacation.
thing I can think of coming back to you, Angelo.
I didn't get a phone call. I didn't get a postcard. The Navy wouldn't tell me where you were. We have a hell of a show tonight, brother. We have not one but two amazing superstars. They are really amazing people. The return of the most controversial man. They call him the most controversial. I like Vince. He's a great guy. The return of Vince Russo to Wrestling with the Future. And Vince, you are the reason for this show tonight, and you know it. And you didn't think I could pull it off, brother, but I had a little surprise for you. I knew Stephen Plym.
Yeah, no, listen, when you sent me that email that it was a go, yes, you caught me by surprise. But I gave you my word. I said, if you deliver, I'll be here, and here I am.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And Vince is a man of his word. And the gentleman that's the ruckus of tonight's show is a man named Stephen M. Plym. The M stands for money.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Stephen. I know Steve Plym. He's a great guy. There's something else that a lot of people don't know about Steve Plym unless you're in show business. For 25 years, he was the best friend of one of the most enigmatic, entertaining, misunderstood, controversial people in show business, a gentleman named Tiny Tim. Incidentally, Steve Plym was also Tiny Tim's manager, babysitter, chef, order taker, the guy that tucked him in at night.
You ain't kidding, baby.
I heard you, Steve. Let's talk about this because, as I said, Vince Russo put out a challenge to me on the episode we did about the Beatles, Paul McCartney, and he said, and I quote, and there were many thousands of people who saw that show, and they heard Vince Russo utter these words: "If you get Tiny Tim's manager on the show, I'll talk to you for 5 hours."
Are you kidding me?
Well, he gave us an hour tonight.
Angel, let's not get panicky. 5 hours.
Oh, God.
But I say, when somebody says Tiny Tim, Mr. Plym, when somebody says Tiny Tim, I stop everything. Everything. I try to spread the Tiny Tim legend to all my listeners. I became infatuated with Tiny Tim at the age of 7 years old, and wow. I am still infatuated by Mr. Tiny Tim to this day.
Unbelievable. Way to go, and thank you.
You are welcome.
And you are here, Steve, because of Vince Russo. You really are. I wanted to
thank you. I got to thank you again, pal.
No, I wanted to talk to you. You and I have had a lot of conversations about Tiny and other people, but tonight we're going to focus on Tiny as a person, as the man.
You know why I like that, by the way? Angela, you know why I like that? That's why I wrote the book. 1 million people could go to a library and look up facts and figures and write a book on Tiny Tim. I didn't want to do that. My book is based on the 25 years I knew him, yes, but the 5 years he and I were together behind the scenes, what really went on. And that's the difference between my book and others that may be out there.
And the book that Steve refers to, I'm holding in my hand. It's called Tiny Tim and Mr. Plym. This is the book. And when I'm finished with it, I promise to send it to Vince Russo.
Very nice. I did read, though, Mr. Plym, I did read Tiny's autobiography, the what Troubadour? What am I looking
That's not his autobiography. A different author wrote that, the Troubadour. I forget his name.
Because he's quoted a lot in that book.
Well, I don't know the author. Oh, it's Justin Martell.
Okay.
Wrote that book a couple years ago, I think.
Yeah, it's fairly recent.
Right. And I haven't read it because I just don't want to read it. It's a very touchy thing with me because a lot of people said, well, Steve, in your book, you didn't go through all his music, his albums, his past. I said, that wasn't the purpose of my book. The title of the book is Tiny Tim and Mr. Plym. It's our story, all behind the scenes, that nobody else could write about or tell except me. So that's why I wrote it. Now, that's the difference between whomever may write a book on Tiny Tim and my book.
Exactly. Vince, when did you first become aware of Tiny Tim?
Oh man, bro, I'll never forget it. I really won't. Rowan and Martin laughing, man.
There you go.
There was Dan Rowan and Dick Martin. Dan Rowan and Dick Martin. Dan Rowan made the big introduction, and Dan Martin stood there as Tiny came on. Yeah, and I'll never forget it. I think it was 68, if I'm correct.
That's right, 1968.
Yeah. I had never seen anything like this in my life.
Nobody had.
Yes,
and I'll tell you something about that.
And nobody has since.
I'll tell you something about that, Vince. The man sitting just above you on my computer screen knows a lot about that because he was there.
Dan, the man was there.
No, Steve Plym.
Steve. Oh, the bottom of you. Okay, yeah.
Steve Plym. Now, Steve, part of this story ties into George Slater. Let's talk about George Slater's involvement.
George Schlatter was the creator and executive producer of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In.
There you go.
Which was the most unique avant-garde show of its time, 1968. And he worried, and by the way, George wrote my foreword to the book, and I thank him a million times. You know, he's a genius producer. I mean, everybody knows him, you know. And he wrote my foreword to the book, and he had to hide Tiny Tim from NBC because, as he tells me, the show was so weird and avant-garde for its time anyway. He was scared what NBC would say, man. So Digby Wolfe was his name. I never met him, but he was a writer and producer, that kind of guy. Brought Tiny Tim in to George Schlatter 2 or 3 days before they were going to go on the air, and said, "You got to listen to this." And they said, "No, we're busy. We're busy." And he insisted. And Tiny comes in with his weird costumes on, and he has a shopping bag. And he pulls a ukulele out and he starts singing.
We have Stephen, we have a phone call coming in.
Oh, cool.
Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Are you there, caller?
I am. I'm here. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. Ask your question. Steve Plym and Vince Russo are here talking about Tiny Tim.
Is Mr. Plym around there?
Mr. Plym is here.
Is that Kurt Dixon?
Yes, it is, Mr. Plym. How you doing?
Hey, baby, I love you. How's Florida treating you?
It's doing well. It's doing well, Mr. Plym.
Oh, my God. Hey, you guys. This was my business partner, financial business partner with Tiny Tim back in the day. I love him. Kurt Dixon.
Don't tell the date now. That'll tell you how old I am. I'm telling you. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Kurt, you finally tracked him down to get your money back, right?
Oh, I tell you what, every time I talk to him, I figure it's going to cost me more, you know. So I didn't know if I should make this call or not, to tell you the truth. I was thinking about it.
Well, you're going to get a bill for it, I'll tell you that.
Oh, am I really? You know. No, I'll tell you what. That's Steve, I'll tell you. I had talked to you not too recently. You were still working on your book, weren't you, on the new book you've got coming out?
Yeah, I have a new one. I'm about halfway through, called Catch a Fallen Star. That's my new book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll talk about that in the show as well, Steve. So, Mr. Dixon, Mr. Dixon, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, give me a little insight into this guy, Steve Plym. I've described him in the lead up to this show as the last of the characters. The last of the great showbiz characters. The fast-talking, smooth-talking manager, agent, you know, chickie baby, let's do lunch. I'll have my people call your people. That's Steve Plym. He's the real deal, though.
Yeah,
I love this guy.
He still takes a hit of that cigarette and says, "Who loves you, baby?" You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey,
Exactly.
hey, Curdy, I only smoke and drink on 2 occasions, when I'm alone or with somebody. That's it.
That's right.
Well, Mr.
No,
Dixon, thank you for calling in. That there's a question you have, fire away.
Well, I was just wanting to see how Steve's doing, and I go back a long ways with Steve as far as Tiny, so I really don't have a lot of questions with Tiny because we go back for all the traveling and that with Tiny and that. I pretty much.
Well,
know
I'll tell
about
you
Tiny.
what then. We have a gentleman on my show tonight who was a mainstay in the world of pro wrestling, but he's also a huge Tiny Tim fan. His name is Vince Russo. Vince, you want to ask Mr. Dixon anything about Tiny Tim? Something maybe someone doesn't know?
Well, I want Mr. Plym to finish that story first, because I don't want him to he was in the middle of that story. I want to hear the end of that story when Tiny Tim performed to the NBC executives.
Yes, absolutely, for sure.
Well, he didn't perform for the NBC executives. Okay, they hit him. In fact, they costumed him, and how they costumed Tiny, I mean, I don't even know, but they hit him because they thought, oh my God, we're going to get in trouble. But in fact, Schlatter said to me, they kind of chastised him after Tiny came on the show, unknown and all that kind of stuff. But after the ratings, NBC came and said, you were right. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
That's amazing.
Remarkable.
And, the rest is history, Rowan and Martin.
Absolutely.
George Schlatter and Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In made Tiny Tim. And George is so kind. He said, we were brand new, Schlatter says, and he helped make us too. I mean, it was a perfect marriage.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Dixon, I thank you so much for calling in. You touched base with Mr. Plym. I'll make sure that he stays in touch with you.
I sure appreciate it. Listen, thanks, Tim. Thanks for coming on the show. You have a good evening. You guys take care, and thanks for having this show. It's great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, I love you, baby.
Hey, you take.
That's good. Yeah, our first call of the night. Now,
wait, let me ask. Can I ask Mr. Plym? So, Mr. Plym, you were there that night of the performance, correct?
Where?
At the Rowan and Martin.
Oh, no, not at all. Hell, I was 18 years old.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Steve. I thought you were there. Oh, you were at the. Wait, was it a reunion?
Well, yeah.
You and I talked about Rowan and Martin privately. Yeah. Was that a reunion show or a reunion event?
Yeah, that was a reunion. That was
okay. I'm sorry, Vince. My mistake.
That was in '93, I think, when I was managing Tiny, and Mr. Schlatter called and wanted Tiny. We had every star in the world there. Schlatter did. We did it at the Lowe's Hotel in Santa Monica with NBC. We stayed there for 3 days shooting. Every star in the world was there, and Tiny was the biggest star of all.
Yeah, at 6'5", he probably was.
Oh my God! Let me digress just for a minute so we get the history right. Okay.
Sure.
In 1968, when he went on Laugh-In, right? I was 18 years old, college student, had a rock and roll band, right? And I sat at home with my parents and watched Tiny Tim, as millions of others did, and I laughed. I said, "Who is this clown? Who the hell does he think? Oh my God, right? So absurd." I laughed anyway, I admit it, just like a million other people, right? And how did I know that 3 years later, I'd book my first job with him and we became friends? It's just weird. Life is weird, isn't it?
Now, how did that happen, Steve?
Well, in 71, I started my first entertainment agency. And I had a lot of bands playing in the Midwest and so forth. And I wanted to break out and I wanted to have somebody big. I'm thinking, I called Tiny Tim's agent. And I want to book Tiny Tim, and it was in Waterloo, Iowa. Get that? Waterloo, Iowa. at the Red Carpet Inn. I'll never forget it. And I was so proud. Because we watched him married with Miss Vicky on the Tonight Show. He's a giant star, right? And I booked him, and I was so proud. I took my mother, my father, my wife, and whoever else would come. We went up there, and that's the first time I met him, and watched him perform. And my God, what a show! I blew my mind. Every conception or preconception that I had went away. I mean, what an entertainer, what a singer. And the falsetto thing with Tiptoe is just a gimmick. I mean, what a baritone singer. And he sang all the songs from the 20s and 30s, and he knew all the artists. Just wonderful. And so I was his agent for that gig, right? So I went in the dressing room and we talked. And as we talked, and then I brought my mother in to introduce, and she loved him. And Tiny takes off his tie. I'll never forget it. And he signs it to my mother, to Miss Betty. She had it till the day she died 5 years ago, in a big frame. And from that point on, guys, we became friends. And then later on, I would do productions and so forth, and I would hire him to be my special guest at sports shows and so forth. We became friends, and on it went. There you go.
Amazing. Vince, in reading Stephen's book, I came across something I want you to pick up on. It says, during the years I was Tiny's personal manager, we shared a lot of ups and downs and hairpin turns that made his incredible life. And he was the most fascinating, loving, charming, honorable, hard to figure out, multi-talented, dysfunctional, and misunderstood person I've ever met. When I read that, Vince, I thought of another guy that you and I share in common, Andy Kaufman.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh. Absolutely.
So let's talk about what was it that Tiny just, he and what's the word I'm looking for? He gravitated toward or captivated people. What was it about him, Stephen or Vince, in your opinion? Vince, well, let me ask you as a fan, Vince, what was it about Tiny that drew you to him?
Just an absolute, I saw at it as an 8-year-old kid or a 7-year-old kid, actually. No, 68. No, I was 7. I saw an absolute one-of-a-kind character. A character. And that's the thing that fascinates me, Mr. Plym. It's a little like wrestling. The whole idea with writing is wrestling is you want people to watch this show and is this real? Is this guy really like this? That's the seed you have to plant.
You ain't kidding, man. You ain't kidding. He captured the imagination. They didn't know what he was.
That's exactly it. So you're watching this guy and you are so, mesmerized. And so again, it's like, is this guy for real? Like literally, does this guy walk around like this? Does this guy talk like this? I mean, so that's the appeal. I mean, off the bat, the mystique of, is this guy for real?
You are so right, because I had to find out. I had to find out. I mean, I was just driven to it. And the more we talked and the more we communicated over those early years, right? And again, I would hire him as a celebrity guest host at my sports shows, okay? And we got to know each other really well. And it wasn't the music, okay? It was the guy, the real guy. I mean, I had to know what he was. We just meshed. All I can say, I don't have another adjective or adverb to put. We just meshed, and it was a love friendship for 25 years, man.
That's remarkable. Vince, I got to tell you, there's a connection, something I want you to explore with me. Tiny Tim appeared on the WWE Raw.
Yeah.
1993.
Yeah.
It was an episode of Raw. I believe it may have been, I'm wanting to say Madison Square Garden.
You know what? Now, let me tell you something. Brain cells. We were either in New Jersey, but I know that Vince McMahon and his wife and me and Tiny ended up at the Garden for dinner. I can't remember whether it was in Jersey that we played or the Garden.
They probably were at the Manhattan Center, because that's where Raw originated from, the Manhattan Center. You're 99.9% sure that's where they were.
I think you're right, man.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Vince, do you have any recollection of how that came about? I mean, you were with them at the time writing?
Bro,
I was his manager, and Vince McMahon called me and wanted him out of the blue, it wasn't solicited, and wanted him on the WWF wrestling. And I just went, oh my God, what? That was, to me, excuse me, but so what? Because I didn't know wrestlers or anything, right? And I'm going, all these macho strong guys, right? And Tiny had somewhat of an image of being gay or effeminate, and how's he going to mix with these guys? And Vince told me fine, and he put us up at the Plaza Hotel. We went in, we did a great show, and let me tell you something. What a wonderful reception. I worried about nothing. Every one of these wrestlers were so kind to him and so helpful. I couldn't believe it, man. It was like a homecoming, like they knew him all his life. I was so happy.
Vince, talk to me about your knowledge or involvement or participation. You were writing the magazine or writing the show at the time?
I wasn't there yet, bro. You kidding me? I never got to meet the man. I wasn't there yet. I saw it play out on television, but I was not working for them yet.
Oh, I thought you came aboard as a writer around then, maybe 93, 94.
94, I realized.
Oh, 94.
So that was before I was even there, yeah.
Oh, I got you.
Man, because you bring up Andy Kaufman, if you remember on Raw, Jerry Lawler interviewed Tiny Tim. So, Lawler was the connection there with Andy Kaufman. And I'm sure, knowing Jerry Lawler, man, I'm sure he must have been a huge fan of Tiny Tim. Jerry Lawler loves that stuff.
He was. And I'll tell you something else, straight shoot. I knew Andy Kaufman.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
I've
awesome.
talked about it on the show many times. Right, Dan?
Oh, yeah.
Dan, you've been very quiet tonight.
Well, I
shut up and speak.
Look at all these excellent voices. I was actually hoping to expand on a question Vince asked. You talked about the character and building characters. Yeah, there's an old saying in wrestling that the best characters are yourself turned up to 11. I was wondering if you could maybe go into more detail about where the line blurred between what we see on TV and Tiny Tim behind the scenes.
Boy, that's a loaded question.
Is that for me or?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, Tiny Tim, guys, the eccentric, bizarre, and all that, we all know that. But he was a real dichotomy, okay? In another way, okay? His sexual appetite was unbelievable, beyond description, okay? It's in my book, and I could have wrote 3 books just on that, okay?
Yeah, he's not kidding.
And then his religious and spiritual thing, man, you guys, and I write that in the book, was unbelievable. I couldn't believe, like 4 or 5 times a day, guys, he would have to go to his room or wherever and meditate and pray. I mean, I don't care what was going on. If it interfered with an interview or what, he had to do it, okay? However, on the other side of Tiny, he loved the girls, and the younger, the better. And that almost got him in a lot of trouble. He didn't know the difference. See, this guy was from Mars, man. I mean, I don't even know, okay? But he just loved women. His sexual situation was, Mr. Plym, I don't know how you men do it. I can last maybe 5 minutes, maybe. How do you do it for an hour or all night? I don't understand it. And then he would have a situation with a woman, right? And come to me or call me at 4 o'clock in the morning, okay? And beg forgiveness. No, I'm serious. Let me give you an example, guys. You're gonna shit your pants on this one, okay? I had a birthday party for him. It's April 12th, and I always would have a birthday party, no matter where, right? We happened to be in Des Moines at the time, so it was convenient. I had everybody come over to my home, maybe 60 people, dinner party, the whole thing. And Tiny would sit in this we called it Tiny's chair, a white leather chair that I bought just for him because he loved it. And he'd sing to everybody. And it was his birthday, right? So he's opening gifts. He opens my gift. It was a joke, okay? I bought him a blow-up doll. A urethane blow-up doll for a joke, right? He opens it up. He goes, "Oh my God, Mr. Plym, this is wonderful. Oh my," and he just went crazy, right? It's a joke. He didn't get it that it was a joke. He thinks this is like real or something. Follow me? Now watch this. P.S. The party's over, 4 o'clock in the morning. My phone rings, right? I'm asleep, half drunk, asleep. And it's TT. And he goes, "Mr. Plym, I want to tell you, I can't thank you enough for the urethane doll, the beautiful doll. Oh my God, what a gift. Oh, I blew it up, and Mr. Plym, I had sex with it in every orifice that it had on it. It was wonderful. I've never had such great sex because there was no complaining. There was no talking. It was just wonderful. And then I realized how I had sinned. Mr. Plym, I sinned. I took the scissors out. I cut it up. I chopped it out in little pieces. I threw it out my hotel room." Click.
Oh my God.
I swear to God, you can't make this shit up like you said.
Yeah.
You can't make this shit up.
You saw, Mr. Plym, I'm a very big Howard Stern fan, and the Tiny interviews were the best far and away. And everything you're saying, you could see that through the interviews. He was being him during the interviews, and he gave you a little insight, and you could see. I think this person you're talking about came out because I would guess Mr. Plym too. He had a little bit of a drinking problem. He did. He liked his alcohol, didn't he?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's not drinking like most people do. Okay, look, Bush beer was his favorite. Bush beer. I would buy him a case at a time. He's a germophobic. He had to have a can wiped off, a straw out of a cellophane, right? And he put it in, and he drank beer out of the straw. 12, 14, 24 cans at a time while he's singing to my friends. And, and then he gets loaded as hell, right? And laugh all the time. And as people laughed at him, he laughed at himself. He was just a good guy, man. He was a good soul. But yeah, Howard Stern loved him.
Oh, and they had great chemistry.
Many times. Many times.
Great chemistry.
The only time Stern and I had a problem, okay, was I was talking about doing a movie, right? Tiny Tim movie based on my book, right? And I put out there, and I told because everybody said, who could play Tiny Tim? I said, well, Howard Stern. And he went, what? I said, well, look, you got the New York mentality. You've interviewed him, you know him. You got the long curly hair. You got the nose. You can play Tiny Tim. He took big offense at that. Giant offense. Oh, God,
Mr. Plym, that's a great thing that you bring up, because I know there was like for about 5 minutes, I know there was like a Broadway play about Tiny for very, very brief. That is the one guy that I think there should be a movie on. Like, why has that never happened?
Well, it's my fault, I guess. I went for it for a while and failed. And then other things, life takes over, and children and so forth. I'd still like to do it, of course. But no, I failed at doing that. And I really hate myself for that, because I believe it would be a wonderful movie. It would draw in not only the baby boomers, of course, but it would be a crossover to today's people. And they'd see what it was like then. And Tiny can relate to so many people on so many levels, especially today.
Is it too late for you to go forward with that?
No, not at all. I'd love to. And I'm admitting to you, I dropped the ball. Okay. And hey, anybody out there wants to talk, I'd love to do a movie based on Tiny Tim and Mr. Plym. I think it would be a hoot. Okay. So if any got any ideas, here I am.
Vince, it's all you. Go ahead, brother.
Mr. Plym, were you there at the end for Tiny?
Yeah, we went, again, friends for 25 years, and in and out of all kinds of different deals and shows and so forth. The last 5 years of his life, that's when I took over management, because everybody screwed him over. Everybody, agents, managers screwed him, abused him, right? And he's going down the tubes. He's playing for shit money. And I said, okay, look, we're in a limo one day. I said, look, okay, I'll do it. Let's. He said, seriously? I said, come on, man, let's go. And I resurrected his career, and I'll tell you how. And it was very simple. But guys, everybody laughed at me. I had the last laugh, and so did Tiny. But check this out. We couldn't get a hit record again. His career was going downhill. He was playing in shitholes for no money. He wasn't on national TV anymore, okay? He was depressed and sad, but he kept it up. He kept going. You know, he's a worker. And I said, he's still in Manhattan, right? And I'd lived all across the country, but I had moved back to Des Moines at the time. And I said, I called him one day. I said, Tiny. Well, no, it was in the limo. We were talking. I said, Tiny, I'll manage you. Here's what we're going to do. Better than a hit record. We're going to move you to Des Moines, Iowa. And I'm going to put press releases out to the world that you, Tiny Tim, the most eccentric, bizarre entertainer of our time from New York City, is moving to Des Moines, Iowa? Are you nuts? People will go crazy. They'll come out of the woodwork, I promise you. He didn't hesitate. Mr. Plym, if you say so, I'm with it. However, my own family, all my friends, my peer group, they said, you are absolutely out of your effing mind. What are you doing? Well, guess what? It worked like a charm. Leno was back. We had Larry King. Everybody called. All the networks called. Every show called. You know why? They couldn't believe it. So I got that platform back of national exposure, see, just by moving him to Des Moines. And I had TV crews walking and following all over the city, right? And it made national news everywhere, worldwide news, right? So now the engagements start pouring in, right? Because he's on the news, he's, you know, and he's on Leno again. He's with Larry King on the 50th anniversary of Larry King. I mean, he was back on top, and he looked at me one day and he says, Mr. Plym, you're wonderful.
There's a woman involved in this that we must acknowledge, Steve, and you and I spoke about her privately. It's a young woman named Miss Sue.
Yes.
Without whom Tiny, and quite frankly yourself as well, without you and Tiny, I mean, without you and Miss Sue, Tiny would probably have been broke, drunk, destitute, at the mercy of slimeball promoters that would use his once great fame for their own benefit. Talk to
they're
me
all dogs.
About
they're dogs.
Talk to me about the hidden gem called Miss Sue.
Okay, I called Miss Sue Tiny's 401k. You get it?
Yeah.
Because she was loaded. She came from a very, very wealthy family. I mean, tons of dough. And I'll never forget it. It was Tiny's birthday on April 12th. And I have a house full of people like usual. And Tiny's late. Finally, he calls me. Mr. Plym, I'm running late, but it's going to be okay. You have no idea who I met. I met this wonderful girl. Her name is Miss Sue. And he'd whisper, because I could tell that she was listening. He'd go, Mr. Plym, she drives a gold Mercedes. A gold Mercedes, Mr. Plym. He says, you have no idea how much money she has. He says, I'm late, but do you mind if I bring her to my birthday party? I know you haven't met her, but do you mind? I said, for Christ's sake, just get here. Everybody's here. We'll meet Miss Sue. Right? They show up. She's weirder than weird. She's wearing a mask before Michael Jackson did. Okay? And with a cane. She had every malady, she said, in the world. And all she did is talk about her sicknesses. The most boring person I've ever met in my life, practically. And I take Tiny in the bathroom and go, what the hell are you doing? He goes, Mr. Plym, I think I'm in love. I said, I know you're in love. You're in love with her checkbook. Oh, and you know, it's the wink in the eye that only he and I knew.
Yeah.
And I would press him on it, and I go, you know, that's what it is. And he'd go, oh no, Mr. Plym. Oh, it's not that. Well, we both knew it was. But yeah, she was loaded, crazy. And he knew, and he was sick and getting older. He was diabetic. He'd never go to a damn doctor. Okay. And he knew that this was his way out where he could live nicely.
Yeah.
And not have to perform very much. And the irony is, he died on stage November 30th, 1996, singing for her and her mother's hoity-toity friends in Minneapolis, singing Tiptoe and croaked right there. And the irony of that is, he and I used to laugh and joke all the time on planes and talking. You know, I go, Tiny, you know, you're going to die singing a medley of your hit. A medley of your hit.
Yeah.
And he goes, you think so, Mr. Plym? I said, I know. And that's exactly what happened. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
What can you say? But that's what
Go
happened.
ahead. It's all you, brother.
Who, me?
All you,
Vince.
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 No, I want Vince to have at it. This is I promised Vince. This
You
is
heard
Vince.
the man.
Yeah, well, Mr. Plym, I know because he was talking about it on Stern. You know, I mean, I think his last appearance on Stern was like literally maybe 8 months before he passed away. He was having heart problems. I mean,
he had a heart attack.
Yeah, he was talking about that on Stern, and you could see he was very, very, very concerned about that.
And the thing is, though, you know, Tiny would talk about that all the time for years. I'm going to die here. I'm going to die there. I'll never see another flower bloom. You know, he's always into that death thing, right? And I'll be in heaven with the Lord, and everything will be okay. So after a while, you didn't even really listen to it because he talked about that all the time. But then in Boston, he had that major heart attack, and not soon after, and he said, I'm not going to live. I think his quote was, I won't be alive for 6 months, and he wasn't. He died.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Plym, were you around him, or was this a little bit before your time? You might have been around him during this time. I'll never forget growing up, New York. You know, of course, we're fans of the same thing, and somebody who was red hot at the time was Morton Downey Jr.
Oh God, yeah.
And Tiny went on there and kind of got railroaded by Morton Downey Jr. because that was Morton Downey's shtick. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, to railroad like Tiny Tim of all people, like it's like railroading, you know, St. Patrick, for crying out loud. Yeah. But he railroaded him, and he started, you know, grilling him about like abusing Miss Vicky, because I know, you know, that was the story that she was telling. And I mean, out of nowhere, Morton Downey Jr. just kind of was drilling him and drilling him and drilling him. And the one thing I'll never forget about that interview was, you know, Tiny just answering every question, regardless of how rude Morton Downey was being to him, just to basically, you know, not only number one, clear his name, but in many interviews with him, even on Stern, man, he always wanted to set the story straight, because there was a lot of shit talked about him. And, you know, he never danced around anything. He always seemed to want to be set the story straight.
You're so exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah. But that interview with Miss Vicky, listen, I don't know what happened behind the scenes. I wasn't there, but that topic really seemed to affect him greatly. They did not, I know they had a daughter out of it, Tulip, but they did not have a good relationship following the divorce, did they?
No, they didn't. In fact, you know, Tiny was not, and listen, when he told me to write the book, if he passed, he says, tell the whole truth, hold nothing back. And I haven't, okay? Tiny was not a good father, and he admits it, okay? He didn't really like children. Even my son, right? And he was around me a lot. He'd be very polite and everything, but we'd have conversations, and he would say, Mr. Plym, it's hard for me to be around children. And I'd say, why? And here was his answer. Check this out. He goes, They know too much.
Mm.
Can you dig that?
Yeah.
And you can read that in a million ways. I said, really? He says, they know too much. He was not a good father, and he wasn't good around children. He'd be polite and everything, but it wasn't his bag, that's for sure.
Did he mend the relationship with his daughter before he died, or not really?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. Miss Vicky, okay, and that was the most famous, you know, they had 45 million viewers for the wedding on The Tonight Show. And now check this out. When Carson left, the night he left, you'd think that would be the biggest, right? He had something like 37 or 38 million viewers. Nobody ever to this day has topped Tiny Tim's ratings on The Tonight Show. Can you dig it?
Nope. That's crazy, man.
Isn't that crazy?
True.
Yeah.
And that's a fact.
Mr. Plym, did he just seemed like, gosh, bro, he just seemed like underneath it all, there was kind of a lost soul, a guy that was really misunderstood, a guy that, you know, was kind of a loner. I'm just curious, did he suffer a lot with depression?
What you just said, those two words, you couldn't have said better. Lost soul. He was, okay? He loved people. He loved life. And he was as honest as you can possibly be. And like you were referring to earlier, he would go on and on as like downing or somebody is insulting him. He wanted to set the record straight. You know, he's just a good guy, right? Do you know how many times, guys, okay, when I was managing him, okay, we'd go here or there, wherever it was, Vegas, whatever, and wherever we're going to be, you know, I'd get a million calls. Can I interview? Can I interview him? Can I interview him, right? So I'd pick and choose. You can't do them all, right? And when the reporter, the press got there, they're all nice and kind and complimentary, okay? Until the red light went on. And then they wanted to make a story, okay? That's why Tiny hated the press. He hated the press. He couldn't stand them because he knew every time he got in front of that camera, no matter how nice they were before the red light went on, they gotta want to go, are you queer? Are you gay? Who did you do this to? What? I mean, I can't remember a nice interview. Okay? And you know how many times I had to do this? And I did. And I saw it coming. They're all nice. They think you can't see through them, right?
Yeah.
And they'd start out very nice, and then they go for the kill. You know, I'm going to make a story. I'm going to make a name for myself, right? And I would just stop the interview, and I'd go, fuck you. Done. Over. Get the fuck out. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Just fuck them. You know, sorry for the language, but these guys tried to bastardize him, right? And he was used to taking it and going on and on. I stopped it.